There are a number of behaviors throughout the book of Proverbs that are praised, and there are other behaviors that are repeatedly condemned and that we are warned against practicing. And one that is repeated the most is the danger of anger, uncontrolled anger. Our verse for today is from chapter 14, verse 29, which says, "Whoever is slow to anger has great understanding, but one who has a hasty temper exalts folly." Earlier in the chapter, in verse 17, it says, "One who is quick-tempered acts foolishly." You know, one of the things as I read through the book of Proverbs and the repeated warnings about being slow to anger and not having a hasty temper, not being quick-tempered, is when I look at our culture and I see how much uncontrolled anger and rage there seems to be. And this is true from people in many of the highest positions in our land, people who are senators, people who are representatives, people in positions of leadership, who don't seem to have learned how to control their passions and their temper and their anger. And obviously we know there's a tremendous amount of violence that takes place, whether that's domestic abuse, whether it's violence that often involves guns, and so much of that is tied up with anger and people not knowing how to control themselves in a mature, wise way. When I was growing up, I really enjoyed watching the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show. And there's a Bugs Bunny cartoon with him and Yosemite Sam where Yosemite Sam has a terrible, out-of-controlled temper, and he always starts hitting things and saying, "Crash, crash, crash, and all sorts of stuff like that. And in this particular cartoon, Bugs Bunny's been instructed that he was left, Yosemite Sam, a great deal of money, but every time he blows his top, he blows some dough. And so he loses some of his financial inheritance. And by the end of the cartoon, Yosemite Sam has finally learned to control his temper, and Bugs Bunny doesn't have the heart to tell him he's blown all the money. None of us want to spend all our relational capital and bankrupt ourselves because we can't control ourselves when we're relating to our spouse, our children, our grandchildren, our friends, and whether that's in person, whether it's through social media, we need to learn to be mature. Feeling an emotion in itself is not a bad thing, but it's how we channel it, how we express it, that's what makes the difference. And that's the goal for us as Christians, is to be slow to anger, to be so rooted in our relationship with God that the fruit of the Spirit, which includes things like self-control and patience and gentleness, is what is shaping us in our interactions, and not uncontrolled anger and rage. When you see that in a person, you know this is a person who is immature and lacking in wisdom.